Warp on down to the Mack Cast Pro Wrestling Tee Store and get your 8-bit on with the brand new Retro Mack Attack Tee. Get an extra life for the whole month of April when you buy any t-shirt and get a copy of Mack Attack, the Mackumentary for free. Available now only at www.prowrestlingtees.com/MackCast.
Ladies and gentlemen, currently broadcasting, accompanied by trainee number 1 from France. He is Monster Mack.
Holy frickin' crap, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Mack Cast. Can you believe it, trainee number 1?
I'm surprised there was no bum in there.
Well, I think that people get what's going on here, that the suspense has been building for weeks and for months, trainee, so there's no need for the dramatic bum. Well, there's a need for the dramatic pause, but not... Yeah, I think they got it by now, because it's been building, and we got a very special episode for you. I can't believe that is going down, and much appreciation goes out to him for doing this, but we don't want to give away the surprise because we got some Mack news in the house.
What's the news there, man?
You don't know? You haven't heard, trainee?
Nope.
You should know.
Nah, I got nothing.
You should know because you were there in the Battle Royal. We made our return to Showcase Pro Wrestling. We were involved in some kind of Rumble Royal. And we worked a little magic with the booker, and we got our entrance together. We came out as a team.
For some reason, for the past few months, every Battle Royal we've done, we've come out as a collective unit instead of individually, which I'm just a big fan of. That was the Mack news, that we came out together?
Well, the Mack news is that we didn't win that Royal Rumble, or Rumble Royal. And we got eliminated by that logo stealing Chris Matrix and boot idea lace stealing. He steals stuff from us. That's what I'm trying to say.
Gotcha.
Anyways, speaking about booking, there was a little situation that somehow, you're on the booking committee at House of Bricks Wrestling?
I have no idea what you're talking about. I definitely did not choose who... I didn't underline all the names on the card in the locker room that then became the card for the show. It didn't happen.
No, because Brickhouse said there's no problem with this card, so everything's cool. So, yeah, that's pretty much the Mack news. We got upcoming shows, too.
Why are you giving my stories away real quick in the headline? I was going to wait, tell the whole thing out. Yeah.
Oh, my bad, trainee. But we have some upcoming shows. We got Renegade Wrestling Alliance. They're coming back, baby.
Okay, I don't know the dates for any of these. Do you?
No, I don't, but it's nice to at least say that they're coming back, baby.
Yeah.
I thought that was a good one.
Get out of here. This is terrible Mack news.
Well, and what, you got a problem with me playing footsies with you? That's why we're on the love seat, brother. It's allowed. It's official.
It's okay, right?
But anyways, yeah, that's the Mack news, training them, and we also have some upcoming shows for Showcase as well. We took them House of Bricks. They're all coming, baby, and it's going to be awesome.
Facebook. Just go to Facebook and you'll find out we'll tell you when it is.
Someone's updating that, right?
Yeah.
All right.
It's not you, but somebody is. In the house tonight, Mac, we have a longtime promoter of New England Championship Wrestling in the house, Sheldon Goldberg. Sheldon, thank you so much for coming down, man.
Oh, man, just when I thought my ship had sailed, I finally made it onto the Mack Cast.
Thank you.
How many years did I have to kick around before I finally made it here? So
we figured we'd give you a break, kid, you know?
I really appreciate it, I was getting a little worried there.
Now, like on the Mack Cast, we don't exactly do things in a linear fashion. There's a lot of backtracking. There's a lot of, we like to talk about our personal experiences where we may have crossed paths in the past and, mesh it all together in one big story. So I want to, right away, my friend Chad, we all went on a Ring of Honor road trip to Glory by Honor in like a van with you, Doug Williams, and Alex Arion.
Okay.
And my friend Chad spilled soda on you at some point during that trip and has told that story for years.
And that's why I never got booked.
Right, yeah.
And mind you, when we bought the tickets to this, they said it was a tour bus that we'd be riding on. And somehow we ended up in a little van crunched in with, like 6 people?
Way more than that, yeah. Now, my question is, how did that trip come about? Why were you there with Doug Williams, with Alex Arion, or?
Well, I had gotten them both booked for Ring of Honor.
Right.
So, we were going to go down there and it was suggested to us, rather than pay us for trans, it's, we got a van going, we got a bus going down
So
there.
just hop in the bus.
Yeah, just hop in the bus, and you guys will be fine. So
they hit you with the bus swindle too. They promised.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
So you guys hop on the bus. Doug Williams, international flight, just flew in, right? Like,
he was there for about a day or so.
Okay,
he worked for us, I think,
the night before. Now, you guys, it's known Doug Williams' first match in the United States was with NECW, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Now, how did that connection come about with you and Doug?
He was in contact with a guy who was a referee for us.
Okay.
And I had seen tapes of him and so forth, so I had an idea who he was. I'd seen his work before, and it was one of those things where he said, well, I'm going to be in the United States. I'd never worked in the U.S. before. I'd like to work. And I said, hey, sure, why not? Absolutely.
Come on down, doors open.
And, I knew he was good. I knew he was, really a good talent. And, one of the things that I wanted to do with NECW from the beginning is not just use local guys, but keep the door open to people from outside the area so that the local guys could get exposure to people. If you're not a guy who's traveling, then to have somebody fresh and different that you've never seen before, never worked before, maybe brings a different style or a different set of experiences into the locker room. I thought that was a good and valuable thing. And you got to remember that when NECW started, there was no Ring of Honor.
Right, it's like 2000, right?
Right, 2000. Yeah.
So the ECW had just closed or was about to close.
Yeah, it was about to close.
And ROH wasn't for about a year or two after that, right?
That's right.
And ROH, big up here in New England, we were like early adapters to the product. And I know you guys used a lot of crossover talent. There was like, I'm trying to think of who. Anytime they would be up here, you would see guys.
We had the two Briscoes against each other.
Right, yes.
On one show. I forget who else we might have had.
Well, you guys had adapted that style of pro wrestling early up here before ROH really had started.
Independent wrestling, as we know it right now, was really in its infancy.
Right.
There weren't, there'd been like, Kowalski had his shows and Tony Rumble had his shows.
And Joe Eugenio down here.
Eugenio down here, absolutely. And so, but really what we come to know as independent wrestling now is just really getting started.
Right.
So we were kind of on the forefront of a lot of things.
The cusp, right? Yeah, I believe internet TV as well, right?
Right. We were the first ones to actually do that.
Now, like, this is pre-YouTube. And we were pretty big on that too. Like before YouTube, we used Google Video. I don't know what platform you guys used to upload
didn't have
with.
A platform. We actually just hosted the stuff on our server.
Right on your website server.
We went through about 5 ISPs before it settled down because people weren't doing that. People weren't hosting video on. You'd see an ad
private
for an
servers,
ISP.
right.
Internet service provider, for those of you who are unfamiliar. I don't want to
yeah, sorry.
I don't want to swerve anybody with the technical jargon here.
What are they saying?
Yeah, but they would say, unlimited bandwidth. And the funny story about that is that we hooked up with this local company. They were I believe they were up in the Lowell area or whatever.
Okay, yep.
And so, local company, great, unlimited bandwidth, great. So we start putting our shows up, and we got an article in the New York Daily News about how we were doing this revolutionary thing with
internet TV, weekly too, right? It was like a regular.
Weekly.
It wasn't like you guys just put like a show up every once in a while. It was like a regular
every
deal,
week, right? And so we had this big article in the New York Daily News, and we got just a huge number of views, and we actually crashed their server.
Oh yeah.
So the unlimited bandwidth was.
Yeah, there wasn't exactly
unlimited.
Yeah,
it wasn't
right, exactly. And the guys, well, we're going to sue you. We're going to do this. I said, well, your thing says unlimited bandwidth. Well, it doesn't mean that. But wait a minute, pal. Unlimited kind of means unlimited,
right?
Don't you think? Yeah. So anyway, so that was long before YouTube and so forth.
Right, because we used to do an online radio show that we hosted off of our server. We didn't do the video because that, again, like you said, it would just crash, take servers straight down when you would host videos on. But we used Google Video at the time back in the day, which I guess YouTube eventually bought.
Right, Google owns YouTube.
Okay,
so,
or vice versa. So then everything kind of got converted. We lost all those old files. I don't know what happened to them. I mean, we have them saved, but like they're not online anymore. So let's bring it back before NECW, before NWA New England. How did you get? involved, not just in wrestling? How did you become a fan?
Jeez, I was a fan since I was a little kid.
Because you're known as like a wrestling historian, right? You're in the A&E documentary.
Yeah.
I own the VHS tape is in that other room over there.
Awesome. You got extra points for that.
Right. Yeah.
No, I was a fan since I was a little kid, but, I had a totally different career before I even got involved seriously in pro wrestling. I used to, when I was a teenager, I really wanted to be in broadcasting, in radio, in TV, and so on and so forth. And I kind of made a little detour. I got involved in professional theater. I used to do publicity for Broadway shows and shows on tour. I created and produced theater stuff and so forth, and had a fairly successful career doing that. And in the course of my theater life, wrestling intersected it.
Right.
I worked quite a bit in the theater district in Boston.
Well, I was going to say wrestling, theater and, TV production mixed together, pretty much pro wrestling.
In this sort of like 6 degrees of separation.
Right.
Sort of all within the same family. I knew I wanted to be in some sort of entertainment. And, when I started out as a teenager wanting to be in radio, I was in an Explorer Scout program that used to meet at Channel 7 in Boston, which also housed WRKO and WROR.
Okay.
And in fact, the very first job that I ever had was giving nonprofit groups tours of the station.
Okay.
And it was the coolest thing in the world because, I got a chance to meet and know everybody. And I was still in high school at the time.
Right. But you're creating those connections.
Yeah, I just, it wasn't like, I'm going to be big and broad. I was just a kid. They just opened the door, and I'm like, wow, this is really
pretty cool. Right.
It was like the crossroads of the world in there. You'd see all kinds of, rock stars and film people and,
all just popping in randomly.
The news, you're just hanging out with them and stuff like that. So for a kid, it was a pretty heady experience. I got a chance to meet a lot of people and know a lot of people, and again, I just felt like I was lucky to be there.
For sure.
So, but if you want to make it in broadcasting, you have to start in a small market and pretty much work your way up to a big market.
Right. Build credibility.
I was in a big market. I came in right at the people that I was around, and I didn't always realize it at the time, but this was like rarefied air. I'm hanging around with, like, these DJs were the best in the business.
Right.
So, and I'm just a kid. It's just these guys I hear on the radio. I see them in the hallway and hanging out with them and shooting the breeze with them and whatnot. So when I went to get a job, there was kind of a rude awakening. I had been doing too much to kind of start at the bottom,
right? But
not enough to it really,
dive in head first in the deep end.
Exactly. So I was kind of a kid looking for a niche, and I met a number of people that were involved in wrestling over the years. I met Kowalski years before I actually got to know him. But to skip ahead a little bit, when I started working in theater, I was in the theater district. I worked a lot at the Colonial Theater in Boston. And when I wasn't doing publicity or whatever for a show, I'd work there. I'd actually answer the phone and take ticket orders and do various and sundry things. If a show that came to town needed somebody to run errands for a star or whatever, hey, here I am.
Right, ready to go.
Whatever. So down the street from the Colonial on the same block, there was a building called the Steinert Piano Building. They had a showroom where they sold pianos, and above the showroom, it was the last building in Boston to have an elevator operator
that physically operated it.
Operated the elevator. But up above the piano showroom, they had a floor that had all these different little rooms. And you'd hear opera singers practicing. You'd hear people giving piano lessons, guys giving violin lessons. It was like something out of the Woody Allen movie Broadway Danny Rose.
Okay, so walking down, it's just music everywhere.
Right. So at the end of that hallway, there was an office, and the guy who rented that office was Abe Ford.
Okay.
That name ring a bell?
It sounds.
Abe Ford was the guy who promoted the Boston Garden and some of the local stuff around Boston for Vince McMahon Sr. And, when I was a kid watching wrestling, going to the Garden, they would, you could get on the mailing list and they'd send you the program every month.
Okay.
And there'd be a little cartoon of Abe Ford, the balding guy with the glasses.
Okay, yeah, okay.
You'd never actually see the guy, but there was Abe Ford.
The drawing was there.
Right. Yeah. And now this is late 70s. We're talking like 77, 78, 79. He was no longer the promoter of the Boston Garden.
Okay.
He and Vince Sr. had a lawsuit.
With each other?
With each other, yeah. And Abe won the lawsuit because he tried to sell the territory to somebody else. He tried to sell the TV and all that
booking
to somebody else.
Yeah.
Right, and Vince Sr. said, well, wait a minute, you can't sell it because you're selling my stuff. I'm the one that's sending the talent up here. I'm the one that's sending the TV. What are you selling? And so Abe won the lawsuit, and Vince Sr. had to buy him out.
Okay.
But Abe, apart from doing that, he used to book country music acts at the Indian Ranch out in Webster. He used to book strippers. He used to book entertainment.
So just an entertainment.
All kinds of different things. And the funny thing was, when you walked into Abe Ford's office, all right, it was like walking back into time 15 years.
Okay.
Like the secretary was old.
Right.
The file cabinet was old. The Selectric typewriter was the first electric typewriter.
Yeah.
Everything was old. Rotary dial phone.
Rotary phone, gotcha.
The whole thing. So I used to.
I'm picturing a lot of plaid too.
Right.
Yeah.
I used to see Abe all the time. I'd run into him on the corner of Boylston and Tremont Street. The Colonial's on Boylston Street. What used to be a Brigham's, and Abe used to eat lunch there all the time. So I would see him and shoot the breeze with him if there was a show, a pre-Broadway tryout, and they had tickets that were given away.
Did he look like the cartoon?
He looked exactly like the cartoon.
That's the only time
the cartoon come to life. Yeah. And it's funny because in his office there was nothing about wrestling.
Really?
Not one thing about wrestling at all.
All the other music stuff.
Posters, it was like, stuff for nightclubs and country music stuff and whatever, but nothing
but
about
no wrestling.
No, that for him, that ship had pretty much sailed. His only involvement in wrestling after that was working with Kowalski.
Okay.
Sometimes he'd book the fairs or the some paid shows or things. I think.
Now, was that part of the lawsuit where he couldn't run shows anymore with Vince?
No, I don't think so. I just think why would you if you couldn't book the
those guys,
Worldwide Wrestling Federation,
right.
What else would you book? You know? I don't know if he helped Eddie Einhorn when he had the IWA came up here. Not ICW. Eddie Einhorn used to own the Chicago White Sox.
Okay.
And he and Pedro Martinez up in Buffalo started an organization in the 70s called the IWA.
Okay.
It was the first attempt at national syndication of a pro wrestling show.
Were they through the cable companies?
No, this is before cable.
Oh, so even before cable.
Was trying to syndicate it throughout the United States and all that. And they ran some shows up here, but they got secondary buildings.
So like
an ice arena in Waltham, or a skating rink,
an armory,
or whatever,
stuff like that.
Yeah, the Wonderland Ballroom they ran, and places like that. They have fairly big stars, but they were basically secondary buildings.
Right.
IWA didn't last long.
They weren't running in arenas, and
they were running arenas in some markets,
but not up here.
They would get the secondary buildings, So it wasn't like an independent. Like they run like 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 seat buildings,
right?
But they just weren't like
the giant production that was WWF at the time.
Well, nobody had a giant production then. It was still the 70s, It was still basically the ring, and that was it,
Just a couple lights, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Now you said that they would send the programs every month, and you started collecting.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And is that where the collection,
right, programs, magazines. When you went to the matches, they really didn't have much stuff for sale. They had 8x10s.
Right.
You buy 8x10s of guys.
No shirts or anything like that.
No shirts, no nothing. People were into the magazines. You'd have pen pals. They'd have wrestling newsletters, fan clubs. They have fan club bulletins back in those days.
Right, and you would all kind of write letters to each other.
Right, exactly. You'd write letters.
Kind of how tape trading started.
Yeah, this is before there were tapes.
Right.
Now I'm old, man. I'm old.
Pre-VHS tapes.
Dirt calls me kid.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah. So that's kind of how I got into wrestling. I didn't really. My world intersected with wrestling with Abe Ford for one.
Right, but you were previously a fan.
I was previously a fan. Yeah, absolutely. And then when I started to produce plays, I met this guy. The story behind it is I was invited to a luncheon, and I was asked to be the guest speaker. It was a chapter of B'nai B'rith, which is a Jewish organization. They had a chapter that was specifically for people that were in advertising and media, and it was a big deal because I had this show that I had created and produced that was a big hit, and so I was in the papers a lot, and I was had a lot of notoriety at that particular point in time, and so I was asked if I would want to be a guest speaker at this luncheon, and I agreed, and I was happy to do it. And so I get introduced to this guy, and his name is Joe Perkins.
Okay.
And he kind of looked like there used to be an actor by the name of Wally Cox. He was kind of this nebbishy-looking guy with glasses. He was the voice of Underdog.
Okay, yeah, that's
right. But anyway, so he owned an ad agency in the area, and I was introduced to him. We started chatting and whatever, and then a guy that knew both of us said to me, "Yeah, tell Sheldon what you do besides the advertising." He said, "Oh yeah," he says, I work for Vince McMahon Sr. I syndicate the WWF TV shows. And this
it's funny how that's kind of just a back burner thing. I can't imagine now people that work for WWE in the network department is like, oh yeah, and I also kind of work for. He was kind of work for Vince.
Well, Joe's a very important person in the history of that company. He started with Vince's father, and then when Vince Jr. took over, he stayed and was a key figure in placing the TV shows in syndication outside of their traditional territory.
Gotcha.
So he was a big factor in knocking down the territorial borders by placing the TV show in different markets that were not part of the original WWF territory.
Right.
And so Joe Perkins was wrestling. He introduced me to Vince McMahon and Linda, and they came to the show that I produced and all that. And here's this guy that I used to watch every Saturday and whatnot, and real charming guy. Linda, I thought, had actually more on the ball than Vince.
Right.
But that was the beginning of my sort of infatuation with the inside of the business.
And that's what's led to your. How did you get involved in promoting? I know. Did you have something to do with the Michinoku Pro guys coming down for ECW?
Yeah, that was a little bit later. How I got into promoting.
Because that was like what, 96, 97?
Yeah, my theater business was kind of going down the tubes. The world had changed in that industry.
Live theater for sure took a hit.
Well, what was happening? I used to do like off-Broadway stuff, so I would rent these smaller theaters to put on productions, and in the early '80s, mid '80s, late '80s. What happened was these theaters started disappearing. There was a real estate boom in Boston, and all these places, which usually were in old buildings that they had turned into theaters because they really weren't worth anything to anybody. They started getting bought up and turned into office condos or turned into commercial property or whatever. And so slowly but surely I found myself getting forced out of that business due simply to economics.
Just not being able to find buildings.
Not being able to find buildings. The cost of the buildings was outrageous.
Well, because once your competition starts getting eliminated, right, you can raise the price. And
it wasn't even about competition. It was just that, there was only so many places.
Right.
And if you can't get the places, then you can't be in business. It's not like wrestling. You can put on wrestling in like almost any empty building that has
right, a little bit of the roof clearance.
But with theater, it's got to be a theater. It can't be anything else. You can't,
got to be a stage. Got to be the seating a certain way.
Right. So as that business started to slide, I just started looking for something else to do. And since I was still was a fan of wrestling and had gotten some of the newsletters, and newsletters started to be a big thing, I said, well, I like to write, and I like to I'd like to try to do a little publishing. So I started doing a newsletter for collectors of wrestling memorabilia.
Okay.
I didn't want to do like the Wrestling Observer,
news or something like that.
I didn't want to do that. I wasn't interested in being like the nosy reporter,
breaking the big news story.
I had no interest in that whatsoever. I just liked collecting stuff. I had a bunch of stuff. I knew other people that had bunches of stuff, and sports memorabilia was starting to be a big thing. And I said, hey, let me do this. It'll be a little kitchen table thing. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't work, but I won't lose any money on it, and I'll have a little fun and bide my time while I'm working another job and trying to do some other things. So it kind of took off for me. I didn't realize at the time that there was a market for it. I just thought, well, it was just going to be a fun thing for me to do.
Something that you wanted to do.
If I had, a couple hundred people that subscribed to it, great, fine.
Right.
I got an article in a publication called Sports Collectors Digest, which is like the Bible of people that collect sports memorabilia.
Okay.
And my subscriptions went through the roof. I went from 150 subscribers to 600 subscribers in a month.
Just jumped.
Yeah, just jumped. And I had people that were helping me, like Dave Meltzer was very good to me in terms of plugging a newsletter, and some of the other people who had magazines, whenever they had a little fan club column, which was a throwback to the old days.
Right. Throw a little blurb in there.
Yeah, like Wrestling Eye was in the Carmine DeSpirito that had that magazine. He always had a little fan club column, give you plugs and whatever. So, and it was just something to do. It wasn't like...
you were trying to make a business out of it yet, or anything like that?
No, I had no illusions it was going to be a full-time thing or anything like that.
It was also something that you enjoyed, that you were...
I was having fun with it, And
right. I'm sure you got some cool stuff, too, out of that, right?
Yeah.
Collection-wise.
Right. No. And I started going to events, not live wrestling events at first, but like conventions.
Okay.
John Arezzi had a big convention in 1990 in New York. He had Flair and Bruno and Buddy Rogers and Lou Thez. I mean, this was like the convention of conventions.
Yeah, the names.
This was like the ultimate, right? And I bought a table, and I was making connections all over the place with people. And like I say, I knew some people from when I was a kid, writing to people, pen pals and so forth. And so it wasn't like I was starting completely from scratch.
Right, you had dipped your feet in there a little bit.
I dipped my toe in the water,
right?
Pretty much. And so before I knew it, I was making all these contacts, and it was just kind of a fun diversion. And I started to do something. And at that convention, I had met Tony Rumble.
Yes, Boston Bad Boy.
Boston Bad Boy. He came over to my table. We started chatting, and we realized that we grew up like less than a mile apart from each other.
Just randomly.
And had never met each other until that moment.
Right, yeah.
Right. And so, I had come to some of Kowalski's shows. Mel Simons, who's the ring announcer for a long time, said, "Oh, you get a table. We'll give you a table. You can sell stuff." And I'd sell stuff for Walter, and I'd sell stuff for the boys if they had their 8x10s, whatever. And sometimes I made really, really good money
just from running a booth.
Yeah, and just through that networking of going to these conventions in different places. I would go to Calliflower Alley. I was actually on the board of the Calliflower Alley Club for a number of years. I used to go to...
How did that connection? How did that come about?
At that 1990
just
thing, I met
through
Lauer, who was at the time one of the people who was running the Calliflower Alley Club.
Right.
And because I was an older guy, because I wasn't a kid.
Right, you're right.
And I'd already done things in business before, it wasn't like I had an advantage because I had already done things and lived a little bit of life
before you just got involved.
Whereas if I was in my 20s or whatever, and just a wide-eyed kid, I don't think the same things would have happened.
Right.
So this is a guy, come onto the board and help us get younger people involved, help us get different people involved, and so forth. So I came on the board, and I would go to the meetings, which were originally in Studio City in California. I had gotten involved after the founder, Mike Mazurki, had passed away. I don't know if you know who Mike Mazurki was.
Again, that name, it sounds familiar.
He was a character actor that was a pro wrestler back in the old days, and he used to have a restaurant in the Hollywood area. And he was very popular among the film community and the stuntmen and so forth. And he used to have these luncheons every week, and they nicknamed it the Calliflower Ear Club.
Okay.
And so it was all people that were somehow associated with the fight game.
Right. Some sort, not just wrestling, but yeah.
Right, but boxing, and so forth. And so it was a real honor for me to be a part of that.
To be there, yeah.
Yeah, because now, like, you're rubbing shoulders with some of the people that you grew up reading about.
Like influences and everyone right there.
It was just a lot of fun.
They all had cauliflower ear, right?
Not all of them.
Not all of them.
Not all, but a
that
lot
wasn't,
of them did. Yeah,
I can imagine.
Yeah, very high percentage. Right. So I made a ton of contacts through that and so forth. And as I started coming around shows, I became friends with Rumble, and I would say, well, what do you want for a table? What can I do for you? He said, I just like having you around.
Right,
we just hit it off. We just became
away.
Friends right away. And I said, well, I let me do something for you. Let me help you out in some kind of a way. So I started like doing the posters and the tickets and the programs. I eventually did the website.
Right, which people now think about sounds like normal things.
Right.
Putting together a poster back then, way different than putting together a poster now.
Exactly. Yeah.
Same thing with like the website you said, like early to mid 90s.
Yeah.
There's not really much you could really. I'm like building a website now. You go to like WordPress.com and they got templates. You just punch some images in and it turns into something pretty. When really back then it's HTML codes and all that wild stuff. It's like a totally different time.
Right. So I had this kind of wacky path to getting to where I ended up being, from theater to
pro wrestling.
Pro wrestling, and and so when Tony passed away, it was a shock to all of us. It's something I've never really gotten over, even after all these years. Still chokes me up to think about it.
Right. Well, you guys, like you had said, become so close.
He was like the brother I'd never had.
Right.
And he was tight with a lot of people and whatever. But
so you only hear good things. Everybody that's ever spoken about him on the podcast it's always been in a positive
straight up guy.
light. Right. Yeah.
He was really I never would have promoted anything if he was still alive. I would have been right there helping him out.
Just right by his side. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he actually encouraged me to get into promoting a couple of years before. He said, why don't you go out to California, be the NWA promoter in California? And I didn't want to go to... First of all, my parents weren't well.
Now, Tony was running NWA New England, right? That was the deal.
Right. So, and my friend Howard Brody was the president of the NWA at the time. So, you should get the LA, you should get that and go out there. But I wasn't interested in leaving the area. My parents weren't well, so...
Right, yeah.
I had family ties.
Reasons to be here.
Yeah, I had reasons to be here. I had no interest in... much as I love California, I had no interest in relocating to that part of the country.
Now, so you're promoting and stuff mid '90s. How did the A&E documentary stuff come about? Like
totally by accident.
Really?
Yeah.
Now I figured that would be like it's A&E, this big company that they would have sent feelers out.
They did. They sent feelers out. They wrote to me, and it turns out that the guy who contacted me, we had a mutual friend.
Okay.
Who was in the TV business in California.
So that's another person you met through networking.
Yeah, but he didn't know that I knew this other guy.
Right.
It was just happenstance. And he said to me, I was on the Calliflower Alley board at this point, and said, hey, we know you do this newsletter, blah, blah, blah. He says, we're doing the whole history of wrestling on television, and we'd like you to help us out. And I'm like, gee, what a cool thing that is for a network. Nobody's ever done anything like that.
And A&E at the time is like a lot of I don't think they were doing documentaries like these long 2-hour specials or anything really then, especially about sports stuff.
Right.
A&E was a lot of history, a lot of
right. This was something totally different for them, and I wasn't an active producer of it, but they would call me and say, well, where do we get footage? Who should we interview? What should we do? Because I was on the board of the Calliflower Ear Club. I was in contact with Lou Thez. Lou Thez was the president of the Cauliflower Alley.
Right, so you had direct access.
So I was very close to Lou, and I knew people. I knew where they could get old footage. Who to contact,
who they had to speak with.
Yeah, and so forth. So again, they're coming out to Boston, and they were going to interview Kowalski. He says, "Well, why don't you come down and we'll interview you too?" And
so you were helping them even previous to them asking you to do an interview.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. They said, we'd like to do this. Would you help us? I just thought it was as a fan of wrestling, as a person who was peripherally involved in it,
right,
and a person who was into it. I said, this is really a cool thing that a network wants to do something about the history of wrestling. So in depth. Right. Yeah. Because before then, who talked about wrestling history? Nobody did.
Nobody. Yeah.
Right. So I said, whatever you need, I'd be happy to help you out. And they would fact check things with me and so on and so forth. And so we're coming out to interview Kowalski. We want to interview you too. We're going to be over at his school and this day and this time and so on and so forth. Come on down. I said, you don't really need to have me on it. He says, yes, we do. Yes, we do. We need to have you on it because you're the one who's helped us find these different things, and you can help us sort of tie the story together.
Right, yeah.
So I go down there, and the guy that was shooting said, well, what do we call you? I said, well, my name is Sheldon.
Right, yeah, it's Sheldon.
No, what are you? And I said, well, call me writer, call me whatever you. He says, how about this? We'll call you a wrestling historian. All right.
Cool. Yeah.
Don't call me late for dinner. You know? Yeah. So all right. So that's how that name got tagged on me.
To Sheldon Goldberg.
It wasn't like, I want to be called.
You weren't coming in there like, it's me, wrestling historian Sheldon Goldberg.
No, not at all. And so the show aired for the first time in January of 1998, and it was the highest rated program in the history of the A&E network.
I watched it. Was when it aired new, and
yeah,
I bought the VHS tape off, calling the 1-800 number or whatever at the end of the episode.
It was unbelievable. It was one of those things where you do something, and I had forgotten about it because it didn't air until months after they had shot the stuff with Kowalski and I, and so forth. So they called me like a couple of weeks before.
Did you get a heads up from them?
Yeah. So I just want to thank you. You did a great job. And you're all over this thing.
I was gonna say you're heavily featured in the documentary.
Maybe they'd show like
a clip here or there, right?
Clips here and there, whatever.
Been surprised.
I was shocked. Tony Rumble called me in the middle of the thing. He goes, "Are you watching this, Goldberg? Are you watching this? You got to be kidding me!" He was popping left and right for it. So anyway, that opened a lot of doors, obviously,
right?
Because now you're on a national television thing that's been seen by millions of people, and they just kept showing.
Right, it played
for
a lot.
years. In fact, that night, Rumble said to me, he says, you just got made in the wrestling business.
Easily.
You just got made because they're going to show that thing for years, and he was right. And the next year, they did the...
It's not a bad thing, either, to be known to millions as a wrestling historian, too. Like,
no, it's not, but
sure,
it's funny.
That helped a little.
People thought it was actually a job.
Right.
Oh, I want to be a wrestling historian when I grow up.
You're the bookkeeper.
Like get dressed, put on a suit, grab a bookcase, and go read wrestling magazines.
Right.
For
take down some notes
8 hours
on
a
this day. Right.
How do I get to have that job?
Closing up the wrestling library and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're the one with the rule book, right? You have all the pro wrestling rules.
Whatever. Yeah. But anyway, it was a cool thing to be a part of, and there's people that criticize, it was a lousy, it was this, but you know what? It was the kickoff of a lot of things that followed. because when we after that they did the biography episode on Andre the Giant.
Yeah,
and that was the interviews that I did were shot in Titan Tower. And as soon as I got there, I drove Kowalski down there. The two of us were interviewed on the same day at the same time, and we were interviewed in a conference room right across the hall from Vince's office. Yeah, so it was pretty cool. They had that time. The Hall of Fame was in the hallway.
Right,
they had a little display.
A literal hall. Yeah.
Yeah, right. It was the hall, literally the Hall of Fame. So we get there, and you can't just drive into the place. There's a little speaker, you drive up to the.
But they have to let you in.
Yeah, so they had to let us in, and so we get up to the lobby, and this big, huge marble. It's like the Taj Mahal of wrestling,
right?
And so all of a sudden I'm hearing, Sheldon Goldberg. Sheldon. I said, they got to think it's Bill. They can't think it's me. No, they can't be making a fuss
they're just
over
hearing
me.
the word Goldberg and everybody's freaking out.
Exactly, yeah. So, no, they were very gracious. I got the little tour of the offices and was introduced to a bunch of different people. Howard Finkel came right out. So glad we want to do some stuff with you and blah, blah, blah. And nobody ever thinks about this. Nobody thinks about the history of the business.
Right.
And, it was the first time that they had ever thought that maybe there's money to be made in the old stuff.
Right.
Sure, they'd put out videotapes and whatnot.
Yeah.
Coliseum home video and whatever. But I think that the success of that took a lot of people by surprise.
Right, and I mean, you fast forward to today where everybody's got a DVD. There's a documentary on literally every pro wrestler that you could think of.
Hell, even I got one.
Right.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Everybody's got one, but to think that it started off with that one, the A&E documentary that just, I don't know, it's crazy.
So I was really honored to be involved in that. Just to have had a hand in that was really a pretty cool thing. So.
And so that was, you said 98 is when it aired, so probably 97 or late 97 when you recorded. That was around the time that ECW pay-per-view. I really wanted to find out how the Michinoku Pro connection there.
Okay,
because we're big ECW fans. I don't know if you know, but the Armory's right down the street from here where they used to run and all that, and we grew up on that stuff. So I'm real.
Right. So I'm putting out Matt Marketplace, and part of the thing with the newsletter is people would say, "Hey, do you know where I could get fill in the blank?"
Right, whatever it may be.
So one of the hot kind of cult companies at the time was Michinoku Pro, because of the lucha style and the
Japanese style kind of mixed together.
Right, exactly. So I got in touch with their office and said, "Hey, do you guys ship stuff overseas? Got people that want to know." And so a guy wrote me back, and he called me from the office and said, "Hey, just want to find out about what you're doing." I sent him copies of the newsletter and so forth. And the guy says, "Well, I'm going to be in Boston for Christmas. Why don't we let's meet? Let's get together. I'll be up there for a day, and we'll get together." I said, "Great, look forward to seeing you."
Right.
So I got the kid at the airport, and as it happened, that night ECW was running at the Wonderland
Ballroom.
Another one in the ballroom, the dog track.
Okay, yeah.
And I brought this guy, introduced him to Paul Heyman, and so forth.
You had a connection with through
Paul Richard.
Paul
Richard was the local promoter
because he used to run all the ECW stuff. Up here. Yeah.
So I said, "Yeah, Paul, let's introduce this kid. His name was Koji, and he was an office boy, from Michinoku." And so he gets introduced to Paul, and Paul says, "Well, we're getting ready to do our first pay-per-view, and we'd like to extend an invitation for the great Suzuki to come and wrestle on the pay-per-view."
So Paul must have had this idea already, just off the top of his head. You think, like when he first met him, or
I think that in the back of his mind, it was a connection that he wanted to make.
Yeah,
because he knew that there was a segment of his audience that was really into that type of thing and wanted to see that sort of thing. So, okay, thank you very much, blah, blah, blah. Koji goes home. 3 days later, I get a phone call. "Oh, Sheldon-san, good news. I see you again very soon." "Oh, how's
Cool.
that?"
Yeah.
He goes, "Oh, I come back with great Sasuke and Michinoku wrestlers, and we're going to wrestle for ECW and make deal to be on first pay-per-view, and you handle all business for us."
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem.
No problem. So they come over here. They all come over. He brings like a load of people.
Yeah, it was 6. There was 8.
No, it was a bunch of people.
Right.
It was like, oh gosh, they had a 6-man. They had another match. They brought their own referee. They brought photographers from Japan.
Right, so it was just like a busload. Yeah.
I had to rent like a big van.
Right, just to carry everybody around.
Right. And so they did. ECW had a couple of shows. They had a show in Wonderland. They had a show in Webster, and Rumble had a show in Chelsea, at the old Armory in Chelsea. And they said, "Oh, we're going to do that show too." So it was kind of an interesting weekend. Everybody was here. WWF was Friday night. They were going to be in Lowell.
Okay.
They didn't make it for that. They're getting a little too late. But on Rumble show, our show, which was still Century Wrestling Alliance at the time, Kevin Sullivan was going to be there, and Kevin Sullivan was the booker for WCW.
Yeah.
And then, of course, ECW. They did the 2 shows. And it was unbelievable. So we're sitting there, and Paul talks to Suzuki, and he's got the little office kid that's translating for him, and so forth. And they make a deal to do the barely legal pay-per-view, and so forth. And it was and again, it was a pretty heady experience
for sure, right? Like
driving around and helping him out, and so on. And so we pay you, we help you. Okay, great, fine. They gave me a bunch of gimmicks. They gave me a bunch of merchandise.
Yeah, just take it. Just take it all. Yeah.
And so comes barely legal. Paul was supposed to have sent them a deposit, and he never did.
Okay.
So
which kind of goes in the. It makes sense, right? When you hear
they're not coming.
Right.
He figures they're not getting. Well, Suzuki wanted desperately to be there because it's a big thing for Japanese to wrestle in America.
Right. Especially on American pay-per-view.
Right. The reason that when they came over for the 2 TV tapings and they brought photographers is there's a phenomenon in Japan called a magazine angle.
Yep.
The magazines at the time, which were Weekly Gong and
heavily
baseball,
featured pro wrestling.
Right, and they were weekly.
Yeah.
So for small companies that didn't have regular TV or only had like occasional things on TV, this was a way to get angles across to people.
Right.
So they would bring photographers to document this whole thing in the magazines, and it just made their company look bigger
than what it
was.
Yeah.
So that's what it's meant in Japan by a magazine angle.
Okay.
It's a uniquely Japanese phenomenon. And so anyway, so this gets a lot of play in Japan. It's a big deal.
Right.
Blah, blah, blah. They wanted to fly me and Paul Heyman over to Japan for a press conference. That didn't happen. We couldn't work that out. But so anyway, comes time for the show. They haven't paid him.
Right.
And he thinks that they're not going to pay him, but he's coming anyway.
Still coming. The whole busload of them.
They're making me feel guilty, like I'm the reason that that Paul didn't pay him. So the night before the pay-per-view, they had this big banquet. It was I think a tribute to Terry Funk.
Okay,
whatever it was.
When he was retiring and he wrestled Brett.
No, Terry Funk wrestled Taz on that show.
Okay, yeah.
Taz or Sabu or maybe it was a 3-way.
Somebody. I'm trying to think of. Yeah.
So anyway, so I had this banquet the night before, and I'm trying to, get with Paul about this check or this money.
Yeah.
It was like $20,000 or something that he owed these guys, and I'm like, well, Paul, you gotta. Oh, don't worry, I'll catch up with you after the show. Don't worry, yeah. I'll catch up with you, whatever. So
like he's gonna have a white envelope with their name on it.
I'm waiting for him. He says, "Well, meet me over at the hotel. I'll be there. I promise you, I'll be there in an hour." And he said, "Well, where are you going to be in an hour?" And I says, "Right behind you, because I'm not letting you out of my sight until I see that check." He goes, "Well, all right." I promise you I'll be there, whatever. So I'm over there, and I'm waiting for him, and finally Paul shows up, and we go up to his room, and he cuts a check for the money. So I meet them at the airplane, and I give them the check.
Just hand it over.
I'm
the savior.
Big hero to them.
Yeah.
Although he thought he wasn't getting paid. He thought he was getting stiffed for sure.
Yeah.
But he was doing it for the
Either way, he was making the trip.
Yeah.
Now, did you make a trip down to Bare Legal, the actual pay-per-view?
I did, yeah. I was there.
And you got to watch the whole thing
then
live?
The story doesn't stop there. They weren't too happy with Paul. They thought Paul was kind of a
shifty dude.
Yeah. So they're saying, well, on the first thing was the next day they were doing Nitro in Philly at the Spectrum.
Okay.
So they want some of the guys. Suzuki wanted to let him go and catch Nitro.
Yeah.
So now I had to arrange and make this happen.
Yeah.
So we get to the building, and I'm figuring, well, I can just go to the back and get somebody, and they'll let us in. I couldn't get a hold of anybody. So we're going over to the building, and I'm trying to figure out which is the way in. And I ran into Dory Funk Jr. and his wife Marty.
Yeah.
He goes, "Oh, just come with us. We'll
just follow us."
I was scared to death that I was just going to look like an idiot because I couldn't get these guys in the building.
Gonna get him inside.
And so we finally got him inside, and J.J. Dillon gave us all the backstage passes, and we were sitting in the hard cam area and whatever, and we, and the young guys like Taka Michinoku and Dick Togo, they all got big eyes, and they're looking at the set, and they're going, "Whoa, Sheldon-san, this is where we want to be. We want wrestler here,
Yeah.
Because they were like indie guys in Japan.
Right.
They weren't, they'd wrestled some for New Japan and spot things, whatever. But
they weren't there on a regular basis.
They weren't making any money over there.
Right.
They were just, young boys, and just, they were regulars for Michinoku.
Right.
They ran small towns and whatnot. So anyway, then Suzuki says to me, "Well, I want you to arrange a meeting for me with WWF. I want to go to WWF and meet with them." So now I have to make an arrangement to get him in the door there. So I got in touch with my friend Joe Perkins, and I said, "Well, what's the protocol? How do I go about doing this?" He says,
"It's a proper way to go about
this. Send Vince McMahon a letter and send it by express mail or Federal Express." He says, "They're going to open that mail. They're absolutely going to open a FedEx.
Right. Instead of just an envelope. Right.
So I sent it over.
Really smart.
Sent it over, and Vince's secretary called me and said that Jim Ross and Bruce Pritchard, they'll be happy to meet with you. Just come up and blah blah blah. You'll be expected. You'll be on the list and blah blah blah. So they met with them, and so he kind of blew his own deal. He wanted to be. He was telling everybody in Japan that he was going to be the first WWF cruiserweight champion or light heavyweight champion, whatever they were calling it at the time. And they were saying, "Well, he can't. We haven't decided that. We're not going to. They did an in your house pay-per-view up in Canada.
Okay. Yep.
With the Hearts.
Yes. With the Hearts at the end, right? Everybody kind of grabs together.
And Suzuki had promised me money he didn't pay. I'd sue him. I had to get a lawyer in Japan to collect it.
Jeez.
It's just a crazy bunch of things.
Right. Just a
but all of a sudden, I'm planted right in the middle of the business.
Yeah. Just boom. There you are.
There I was, right there. It's all through no deliberate plan of my own.
Right.
I was just happy.
As I say, you're knee deep in
doing this. Exactly.
So when do you make the move over to actually promoting?
That was after Rumble passed.
After he passed, and
I like to think that Suzuki was wearing his mask the whole time. Is that
most of the time?
Is there anything true to that?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
It was funny. He was after the Barely Legal pay-per-view. We went to a diner nearby, and Paul was there, and Joey Styles comes up to the table, and I was with my girlfriend at the time. Me and the office guy from Michinoku and Suzuki and my girlfriend were all sitting there, and Joey leans over to me and goes, "Which one is Suzuki?" And we all pointed to my girlfriend.
Yeah. There's nobody even there. So you make the move over to promoting.
Yeah. See, Tony, he died under very tragic circumstances.
Right. It wasn't something that was expected.
No, it was a sudden heart attack. Both of his parents died young. He died of heart disease.
Yeah.
So it ran in his family.
Genetics, yeah.
It was genetics. Ran in his family. And, Tony, he was really a good guy. And, just before he passed away, a lot of people don't know this story. I wanted to tell this story specifically here because people don't know this story.
Yeah.
People think, oh, well, Tony, died suddenly. There's a little more to the story than that.
Than what people know, yeah.
Right. So we had done a show in a town called Thomaston, Connecticut.
Okay.
And it was a fundraiser for the local fire department. It was a paid show.
For people that don't know, it's like a company buys everything out from a wrestling promotion. You kind of come down.
Fundraiser.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, it's a fundraiser. So sometimes they were done by telemarketing companies.
Right, yeah.
Who would have a contract with a local police department or fire department.
Yeah.
And, they do an ad book. They sell ads in it, and they canvass everybody in the town. And they pay the wrestling company a set amount of money.
X amount of dollars, bring in a couple stars.
Exactly. So this was one of those things. And we were supposed to have, I think, Scotty 2 Hottie and maybe Albert on the show, and they got pulled at the last minute.
This is when they were working for WWF?
Right.
Okay.
Right. At that time, you could get
like
lower
the
card guys,
lower card guys out.
What were called third-party bookings.
Okay.
They still allowed those from time to time, depending on who you were and what it was. So both of those guys got pulled at the last minute for some other charity event that the WWF, I think it was a charity softball game that Michael Bolton was putting on in Connecticut and so
something
forth.
Random, I'm sure.
Something like that. And so the people that had bought the show, the fire, did not do a very good job of selling the tickets.
Okay.
And they took a loss. And they started the guy that had worked with them previously was a promoter in Connecticut named Mike O'Brien, who owns Northeast Wrestling.
NECW, yeah. I was going to say the O'Brien name.
We had butted heads with Mike O'Brien because Mike O'Brien wanted to be the NWA promoter in Connecticut. The problem was that Tony was NWA New England, and that New England included Connecticut.
Right, yeah.
O'Brien had gotten chased out of New York where he was running shows because he ran shows without a proper license. He was banned from the state of New York.
Okay.
He wanted to run in Connecticut where there was no commission and be the NWA.
Right.
He couldn't do that. Tony, his cousin was a car dealer. He owned the Toyota of Wallingford, and we had done some shows with that guy, and so he had a presence in Connecticut,
right.
And he wasn't giving that up. So we had a guy that was working for us who was in Connecticut helping Tony to sell shows. His name was Michael Breen, and we got this town, Thomaston, Connecticut, which O'Brien had before us.
Right.
O'Brien threw a fit.
Flipped out.
He flipped out. He found out that they lost money on the show, and that the guys who were the stars that they were told were going to be there were pulled at the last minute by WWF. And we all know the phrase "card subject to change," or whatever. Right. So O'Brien gets the fire department all stirred up that Tony defrauded them.
Okay.
Right. This is what happens when, a group of people decide to run a show and they don't know what they're doing. They don't realize that
the mistakes they're making.
Put the name wrestling on the door and open it and figure that it's going to be
just going to fill up.
2,000 people walk through it.
Right.
That's not how it works. So, it wasn't an embarrassing house, but they didn't make any money.
But
they lost money.
Yeah.
So they went to the state attorney general in Connecticut, and they threatened to sue Rumble.
Jeez.
So I had heard about this and whatever. So the day that he died, he had like a screaming phone call with O'Brien.
Jeez.
That was the last person he spoke to when he was alive. Had a massive heart attack and died right after that.
And do you think that had a lot to do with...
I'm sure it wasn't a direct result of that. I'm sure genetics played a part and whatever. I'm sure, but I don't think he's blameless.
Yeah.
But the worst part of it is that after the guy is dead, he comes after his widow. He wanted to make sure that there was no way that any remnant of the company was going to come back to Connecticut.
So he went after,
move him out of the way. And O'Brien got kicked out of the NWA over it.
So that's what caused him out of the NWA, because he went after Rumble's wife.
That's right. He went after Rumble's widow and all that. So that's the story that people don't know
right,
about what happened there, and about Mike O'Brien.
I always knew there was like a weird heat.
Everybody thinks this guy's a great guy, and he's not a great guy. He's not a great guy.
Just because you're a good promoter or a successful promoter doesn't mean you're a good person.
Right, exactly.
And I have had no interactions with Mike personally, but
he's been around a long time.
Right.
He runs a lot of high-profile shows. People think he's a successful guy. He doesn't cheat talent or whatever. But I cannot get past
what
that
happened. Yeah,
to go after the guy after he's dead. I think that's pretty low class
for sure.
And he got booted out of the NWA over it. And,
because of some of your influence?
Wasn't just
a little
my
pushback,
influence.
right.
All of us who were involved in the NWA at the time were pretty outraged over the fact that he did that. I mean, Howard Brody was still president of the NWA at the time. And we were all pretty upset with him over that he would do something so underhanded and low. No respect.
Now, when you started running shows as New England Championship Wrestling, why didn't you take the NWA name?
Well, what happened was Tony died suddenly, and it was his widow's decision as to what to do with the company.
Right.
So a lot of people thought that Pat Doyle, who was the kid that had done the TV, and he was really maybe closer than anybody to Tony.
Yeah.
He was in charge of the Melrose cable access station, had access to all the equipment, and he did a phenomenal job producing the cable access
TV
show.
stuff.
And later, when we were on WNDS,
you used the same guy.
Same guy. He was great, But after Tony died, Pat just kind of wasn't interested.
Right. Understand.
So what happened was that while we all thought that his widow would pick Pat and myself to run things, she didn't. She picked Jeff Katz, who was a radio talk show host.
Yeah,
and Knuckles Nelson.
Yep.
Right. And it was just a lot of people were shocked by it, but it's Tony's widow. It was her choice to make.
Right.
And we were trying to help out as best we could, but things were happening that shouldn't have happened. Like, for example, the first show that we did was in North Adams, Massachusetts, way out in the western part of the state near the New York.
It's about 4 hours from here.
Right. It was a telemarketed show, paid show, and at a college, I believe. And so it was the first show without Tony, and Jeff Katz and Knuckles Nelson were running the show. And King Kong Bundy was the headliner, and Jeff did something with Bundy in the main event where he comes out and he's wearing Tony's trademark baseball
jersey, yep,
and has his batting helmet. And it was one thing for him to come out with that stuff, but they did some kind of thing, and he ended up getting clobbered by Bundy and was laid out in his
wearing the stuff, yeah.
Which I think just about everybody on the card thought was really in poor taste. Really, really bad.
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of rumors and a lot of talk going around about what was going to happen and whatever. We had a meeting subsequent to that, and Katz and Knuckles were like, well, you want to come around and sell your little toys, you can do that, but otherwise,
Jesus.
Blah blah blah. And I'm trying to help out.
Right? Yeah.
I had told them that I felt that if it was really going to work, Tony's wife would have to be intimately involved in the business of the company. She'd have to be actively involved.
Right. Kind of overseeing things.
If it was just like, well, she's sitting on the couch waiting for us to come and give her money, eventually that's not going to work.
Right.
Eventually that's going to blow up. they just wanted to do things their way. I really didn't have a say, so that was that. And the next thing we were doing was in Connecticut at an arcade that I eventually ran the first NECW show in. And when Katzen had come to me and said, hey, I want you to do posters and I want you to do stuff for the website and whatever, they wanted me to false advertise names.
Oof, that's a little weird.
Yeah. So
now basically just slap people on a poster and say they're going to be there. And
Right. They wanted Abdullah, they wanted Bundy, guys that weren't booked.
Right.
So I can't do this. I can't. Well, I said, look, man, I'm out of here. See you. Good luck.
Right.
Here's the password to the website. Here's all the stuff you need. Good luck. See you around.
Right.
And nothing against those guys personally, but I think they thought that it was going to be paint by numbers.
Just kind of go out there and bip.
Yeah,
everything would be
they
fine,
could just
right?
pick everything up, and it would be the same, and it wasn't going to be the same. Without Tony, it wasn't going to be the same. Tony was incredibly street smart. He was incredibly street smart. He knew just what he was doing. I don't think that without him, they had a snowball's chance.
So the company basically didn't have the same heart as it
didn't
had.
Have the same heart.
Right.
It didn't have the same heart. And so they basically undid everything he did in 6 years was undone in 6 months. And then Jay Rumble ended up taking it over.
Right.
It kind of moved on from there.
But you branched off and started NECW.
Yeah.
Around the year 2000. That was from, like they were saying, sell your toys at the.
I didn't care about that.
Right, but to jump back into promoting, where did that
was a big leap. That was a very, very big leap. Scott Dickinson was really the one who said, you ought to start something up. I'll help you. Blah blah blah. And I thought about it, and I said, you know what? If I don't do it now, I'll never do it, and I'll always wonder if I could have done it. So I'd rather give it a shot and see what happens. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out.
Right.
Then say, gee, I want. What would have happened if I had actually done that? And I kind of, I like I say, I never would have promoted if Tony had been alive. I never
right. You wouldn't have been going against him. Or...
Nobody would have gone against him.
Right. Yeah.
It was after he passed away that things really after NECW started that really there started to be an explosion of little companies.
Promotions everywhere. Right.
Yeah. I mean, don't forget that Tony was working with Kevin Sullivan. He was working with Jim Cornette.
Right.
When Cornette was in the WWF office in Connecticut. I mean, this. I brought these guys from Japan. We were as connected gets.
Right. There was not. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah. So there was, people didn't want to run against. They wanted to work for the company.
Right, rather than against.
Exactly. But, like anything else, where there's wrestlers, there's wrestling.
Yes.
So the more guys that are training and the more guys that are doing, you're going to have shows. So that's how that goes.
Right. Now, when you first started running NECW, was TV always the idea?
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
That's because NWA, you guys had like a TV,
Well, that's what wrestling is.
Right.
To me, if you're not doing some sort of television, whether it's online,
right, internet or actual TV,
on broadcast, or whether it's on cable, or you're not trying to do that, you're not a wrestling promotion.
Right.
You're just a company that does spot shows.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
And see, to me, you got to remember that when I started coming around, what passed for independent wrestling around here with Kowalski and then Rumble and Richard Byrne had shows and so forth. They were mostly paid shows. They were mostly telemarketing
just being
shows.
Bought out.
And Walter might have 25 shows in a year, but he'd run the town once in a year.
Yeah, it would be different spots every time.
It wasn't like he was promoting these shows and going back month after month
for people to see the build up and the blow off or
exactly.
anything like that.
There was none of that. It was just a show.
Right.
And that was it. And so I felt, and Tony was moving in that direction because Tony
same way too.
While Tony really relied on the stars and they were basically spot shows, he would have a few angles here and there. He'd do some things that
right.
TV was very important to him. Tony had come up with the Savoldis, and he always would say, I got paid to practice.
Yeah.
You know, he learned how to do TV from the Savoldis. He did a great job with what he had done. He had Pat, who was a great hand at that part of it. And, you know, say what you want about his product, it was still a TV product.
Right, and presented it.
Yeah. I mean,
presented well.
Right, exactly. So, you know, that's wrestling. That's what wrestling is, you know. We had 16 weeks on WNDS. That was a barter. It was basically a trade for the show for the time.
Okay,
you know?
now I was going to say, I know with a lot of those independent cable companies like that, you buy space, you can kind of sell your own advertising on the time.
Well, this wasn't, he didn't even pay for it.
Okay.
You know, they basically gave him
just the time, just gave him the slot.
And you know, he had so many minutes of time that he could sell and use, and the station would have the rest of the time.
Okay.
He was working on getting a sponsor. He had a car dealership called Atlantic Toyota.
Okay.
That was going to sponsor the show. He had 16 weeks on the house.
Yep.
In order to build it up and so forth. So towards the end of the 16 weeks, Atlantic Toyota pulled out. Okay. And he was going to regroup and try to get it on again and so forth, but he died just a couple of weeks after that.
Right.
So that was a big heartbreak for him. He really wanted to be on the air. He really, you know, TV was a very important thing for him. I personally thought that the cable access show was better than what we did for broadcast.
Now, why do you feel that way?
Well, when we went to broadcast, we started shooting in the Melrose TV studio. And we wanted to keep the TVs separate from the house shows.
Okay.
And all that. But, you know, he'd do the wraparounds that he'd shoot in different locations and whatever. The show had kind of a more open feel, but when it went into the studio and it was just in the studio, it was more of a closed-in type of thing. And I just didn't think it was, you know, as effective or as good as what we were doing beforehand, you know.
Now, was that TV, dealing with those TV experiences, get you ready for the Comcast deal? Because I feel like that you guys kind of got boned on that.
Yeah, I'll tell you the whole story, which has never been told before.
All right,
the whole story.
Wasn't there like
out today?
For sure,
lucking out big time.
Wasn't there like a lawsuit too afterwards? It was like
I'll
people.
Tell you the whole story.
All right,
only around the Mack Cast.
Yeah.
That's right. You're getting a world exclusive on this. So anyway, I mean, it was. You got to remember, I wasn't producing the TV or whatever. I wasn't actively involved in it, peripherally so. Sometimes you'd see me on it or whatever.
Right. Just kind of.
I was just there helping Tony, you know, run the business, do the website and the posters and whatnot. And I had the gimmick. The gimmick table is how I got paid. So you didn't have to pay me. I was just. I would have done it anyway.
Right. You were there either way.
Right. Exactly. So you know, it was all these were important experiences. But when I started in NECW, I realized a couple of things at the beginning. Number one, can't be the same thing that Tony was doing because Tony was Tony. He had his own personality and his own unique way of doing things.
That would work specifically just for him.
Right. If I tried to do a Tony Rumble type show, it wouldn't work.
Right.
I knew that was it.
You had to figure out what a Sheldon Goldberg show was.
Exactly. And, you know, I would say that it took me a good 5 years before I really kind of got my feet under me. You know,
right? Find the groove.
I don't care. You know, I don't care who you are. You know, you can say that. You know, I'm a smart fan. I read all the newsletters. I know what a 5-star match is. I know this. I know that. But I guarantee you that take any one of those people, put them in a situation of actually having to promote a wrestling event or a promotion, and they close after intermission.
Yeah.
Most of them wouldn't make it.
Wouldn't make it to the day of the show, never mind intermission.
Right. You know, there's a lot of people that have come along who, you know, dropped tremendous amounts of money and, you know... Failed. Just went away.
Yeah.
You know, lost fortunes.
I'd say that's definitely a testament to you at year number 17 right now, right? You're going into the...
See, I didn't have a fortune, so that was a...
Right, you had to...
You can't lose a fortune you don't have, so there you go. You know, that was... I had to, you know, kind of do it with whatever I had at my disposal. Sometimes that wasn't much, but, you know,
Make the best of everything you can.
Yeah, that's an important thing. You can go into something with too much money, and that's the chaotic story,
right? Where they just blow it all.
4 guys, trust fund babies, lost over $1 million in the first 3 years.
Jeez, that is a lot of coin for an independent wrestling promotion.
How do you do that? Yeah, it's funny. I heard an interview with the podcast with Jamie.
Yeah.
Who, very personable guy. I've talked to him a couple of times. I don't have anything, against the guy personally. But, he was talking on this podcast about how, when they started, everybody was mad at them and all that. Well, the deal there was, and why people weren't happy with them, was because they had no qualifications to be a wrestling promoter.
Right, just kind of...
All they had was a big checkbook.
Here we are.
It's like, the 3 of us could be sitting here watching Blue Bloods.
Right.
And it would be like us saying, let's get some badges and some guns, go out and arrest people.
Right.
Just, come on.
Just jumping right in.
It's supposed to be professional wrestling. It's supposed to be a highly skilled profession. And, Jamie admitted he'd never even been to an independent show before he started promoting.
Yeah.
So, nothing against what they've done since or whatever, but, they had a really big financial learning curve. I had a learning curve too.
Right, but it just wasn't. You didn't have that.
In 17 years, I haven't lost 6% of $1 million. So,
right, that's crazy. That's $3 million.
I'm not saying I made money. I'm not saying I made a fortune. Not saying whatever. But I can tell you, I wouldn't lose anywhere near.
Right, not even close.
Did you rely on bringing down stars on your first New England Championship Wrestling show?
No, my whole idea was, when I started coming around the independent shows, what I thought was really interesting to me was not the headliners.
Yeah.
Well, some of them were cool guys and nice people and, craftsmen and journeymen and guys who were like pros at what they were doing. The guys who were interesting to me were the other guys. The guys who were trying to make it.
Yeah.
Now, I tell a story about Perry Saturn, about the first time I ever met Perry Saturn.
Sweet.
He was doing the gimmick as the Iron Horseman. I think he might have weighed about 180 pounds soaking wet.
Yeah.
And he just came through the curtain for his match, and he just had that aura about him as a guy who was serious.
Yeah, you
he
can tell
had the look of a guy that was going to be a professional wrestler and a successful one.
Mm-hmm.
In theater, we call it having the chops for the business.
Right.
And it's something that you can just tell.
The it factor.
When a guy comes through a curtain, you can tell if they look like a pro or they look like a schmo.
Right.
And it's nothing against anybody else, but you can just tell by the aura that they give, the way they walk, the way they carry themselves, and so on and so forth. And so, as I got to know Perry, how he moved out here from Cleveland and slept in his car and all that.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to work with actors. I worked with a lot of actors, and some of them were wonderful people, but I never met an actor who had the balls that a pro wrestler had. Any guy, even the worst guy who ever stepped in a ring, had more guts and more balls and more than any actor.
Right.
Yeah. And nothing against actors in general, but, just the degree of difficulty for a wrestler is much greater. And so that's why I said, what would happen if you gave the ball to these guys and said, okay, you're the stars. Let's take the names off out of it.
Yeah.
Let's try to run on us. Let's be the show that is about us. Now, I can't say we were the first to do that. I mean, Joe Eugenio, some degree did that.
But he would always run his bigger shows, would always have names on them.
Right. I mean, you did what you had to do back in those days. And, I never met Joe Eugenio, but I have a lot of respect for what he did.
Yeah.
He had quite an operation for quite a number of years.
Oh, and Ricard has taken over, and it's kind of fine-tuned it again to doing his own thing.
Times
out there,
change, and
they change with it
so
for sure. But I went, countless top Yankee Pro Wrestling shows in this area for so long.
Right. So what I wanted to do was something that had a little more of an aura of seriousness about it, and I wanted to use the local guys as the stars. That was my whole thing. And it's not like we were totally devoid of people that had names. I mean, we used Jason Knight for some of our early shows. We had Joel Gertner on a couple of shows. But these were guys who were friends of mine that I knew.
Right, and local enough, right? I think Knight was a Connecticut cat.
And they weren't the main event. They were supporting the main event. They were
supporting cast.
Exactly. So that was kind of what the difference was. And the other thing, too, was it didn't happen right away because when we started NECW, we were just doing a show every 4 to 6 weeks.
Right.
But as we got more into it, we were trying to build angles and build programs and so forth and try to get people coming back again and again. And, before you knew it, you started seeing people carrying signs for folks and whatnot.
Right, and that must be a great feeling, right? Something that you're building slowly, and you're watching these people become connected to and invested in.
Right. And add to it, letting people come in from the outside who later became big names but weren't known by anybody then.
Yeah.
Doug
Cena,
Williams, we already talked about Cena versus Frankie Kazarian.
Right.
On an NECW show. You
had Devitt, right? You guys used
Devitt, yeah,
for a while.
That's an interesting story too. He had written to me and from Ireland, caught me online and said, "Hey, it was referred to you, and I know that you book foreign guys. I've got family in Watertown, Massachusetts. I've got an aunt and uncle, and I want to come over and stay for a few months. And would you be willing to book me and help me out?" And says, "Let me send you a DVD of some of my matches, and I would appreciate whatever you could do for me." So he sends me this DVD. And Bob Evans was the NECW booker at the time.
Yep.
And so I knew instantly that that kid was going to be something.
A star,
special.
yeah.
Knew instantly. I gave the DVD to Bob, and Bob was like shitting all over him.
Really?
Yeah, Bob's, he's a spot monkey. I don't want to do anything with him. And so I said, "Well, Bob, I promised the kid already. He's coming in.
Yeah.
Whatever." And so Bob really wanted nothing to do with him. So we used to do these internet tapings at Bob's school.
The Slam Tech school. Was it Slam Tech TV? What was that? I can't think what it was called.
It was Slam Tech was the name of his school.
Right, yeah.
So anyway, he drives down with me. My car broke down when I had just about gotten there. We finally get in there, and there was a kid. I'm trying to think of his name. His real name was Keith. It'll come to me, but that's what happens when you get old.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, this kid hadn't wrestled in about a year.
Okay.
He had a lot of ring rust. He was one of those kids that nice kid, good guy, but didn't know if he wanted to be a wrestler or not. So he didn't really have. So anyway,
the drive wasn't there.
Right, exactly. So Bob puts him against Fergal, and Fergal gets in the ring with this kid and makes him look like Ric fucking Flair.
Right, just out there bumping.
I mean, everybody's going like, they're just jaws are dropped.
Right.
Now Bob's like, "Well, I want to work him. He's awesome. He's the greatest guy ever. So anyway,
seen what he could do with the kid with the ring rust. And opinion changed drastically.
Right, exactly. So
humorously, around that time when Bob was NECW booker, we had done some training at Slam Tech. We actually filmed a bunch of NECW shows. Okay. Like helped out filming at the Good Times Emporium a couple times.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We met you then too. Long time ago though. That was
again
many moons.
My mind is a blank on that, and it's probably just because I'm old.
Right. Yeah. But yeah. So I kind of remember the time when Devitt was working NECW.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
cool guy, great kid, phenomenal person. I actually kind of called in a favor to get him into the New Japan Dojo.
Right now, I was going to say, what was
Santa Monica?
Because he left soon after, right?
Right. He wanted to make that connection, and I knew Simon Inoki pretty well.
Yeah.
And Dave Marquez, who was a good friend of mine, was running it. Although I wasn't really close with Dave at the time, just because we hadn't met yet.
Right.
And so I had called in a favor with Simon and said, "Hey, listen, I got this kid out here, and he's the real deal.
Right.
Can you give this kid
take a look?"
Yeah, and he was happy to do that. And they just thought he was terrific, and again, eventually they took him to Japan, and just
it's been a crazy ride for him, since then, right?
Exactly.
Now he's, I'm sure, going to be making some sort of appearance at Mania. It's a crazy thing, I'm sure, for you to go from that guy sending you an email.
I'll tell you, I saw him last summer. He came in for NXT.
Yeah.
And it was the night he lost the title to Samoa Joe.
Okay.
So after the show, we're at the Kowloon. A bunch of people. Adam Pearce had called me and invited me down to the show, and we couldn't connect in the building, but he asked me to come to the Kowloon afterwards. Yeah. So I hadn't seen Fergal in a couple of years, and comes up to me, big hug and whatever, and we're sitting there and we're talking, and he says to Adam Pearce and to some other people, he introduces me and said, this guy is the guy that first got me booked in America, and he believed in me when nobody else did, and if it wasn't for him, I might not be sitting here right now.
Right.
Which was really a kind thing for him to say.
Sure, it must have been, just cool for you in general.
Yeah, and he just deserved it. I don't do this thing because I'm looking for credit for people, but it's a happy story.
When you do get it, right? Like when...
Oh, it's great. Yeah. It's nice to know that you've been remembered by people and you're appreciated by people. It isn't always the case.
Right, of course. But he stayed a humble dude, so from what you've seen,
just a great kid, humble kid, just a phenomenal person, and deserves every little bit of success that he's achieved.
Currently achieving.
Yeah.
Well, it was a bummer for sure after he had won the Universal title, but tore the shoulder right afterwards. Was the rotator cuff?
I think it was
believe.
Rotator cuff, yeah.
That sucks so bad. That's such a terrible injury. Right, for sure.
It takes a lot of rehab.
Yeah, if after surgery, it's like another 6 months on top of all physical therapy, and that's terrible. I told my rotator cuff like a year and a half ago, and it took me about 6 months to get back to 80%. Never mind 100. Now, before the TV deal happened, you guys merged with PWF,
right?
Which is like was Matt West. I mean Matt West, and I'm trying to think of who else was Kyle. Yeah, Matt and Kyle. And how did that come about? Was it just because they merged with you guys, but the name stayed, the NECW name stayed?
I had a pretty bad breakup with Bob Evans.
Yes.
Basically, Bob got caught with his fist in the till.
Okay.
Can't say a lot of good things about Bob Evans.
Yeah. I had known that there was some sort of falling out. I didn't know the direct details.
Well, he was skimming everybody.
Okay.
Skimming me, skimming the boys, skimming everybody. He did a lot of mean-spirited things. I try to push the company forward, and he'd do stuff to hold it back.
Yeah.
Like, for example, we had a show. We did a couple of all-women shows under the NECW banner.
Yeah, but this is before you guys did the Triple W stuff, right?
Exactly. And I wanted to experiment with it because I thought it would work. I thought it would be good.
This is kind of being ahead of the curve,
right?
Because the whole women's revolution thing.
My friend Dave Prazak was doing all-women shows with IWA Mid-South, which eventually became Shimmer. So and we had enough girls around. We had like 6 or 8 girls or whatever. We had pretty much almost enough.
Yeah, to book a whole show,
put a whole card together with. And so we do a double header at Good Time Emporium. And Bob was kind of upset because I wanted to put the women on last.
Okay.
And he thought that was the wrong thing to do. And anytime I would do something that would try to get the company, he'd try to knock it back.
Gotcha.
Once he took over the book, a lot of the better talent was pushed out in favor of his students.
Okay.
Because they were all guys who were paying him.
Right.
So in other words, when it came time to pay everybody, he could say, well, that's part of your training.
Right.
Pocket their money, whatever. So it was a bad time for me personally because my dad was in bad shape and he was about to pass away. And eventually he did pass away during that period of time, and I was a mess. I was suicidal.
Just not mentally stable.
No, I mean, well,
never mind to run a wrestling. Never mind run a wrestling promotion. Like life's falling apart.
I had a day job that I hated, 40 hours a week of just agony. My parent is dying. My dad had been sick for many years. and all these things were going on, and it was just difficult, it was difficult. And instead of being supported, anything this guy could do to dump on me or whatever, I almost felt like a battered wife,
right,
in that situation. And so anyway, we'd do this women's show, and I'd say, no, the women go on last. And so during the show, he has the guys, he'll start like somebody's entrance music in the middle of the match, while the girls are working, and have some guy fire up. He had one kid come out behind a tree, I'm the tree man, whatever, just trying to ruin the show.
Right, just weird.
Just deliberately trying to ruin the show. Disrespected all those who hated women's wrestling to begin with. Disrespected the girls completely. And it's what was really too bad about it is I really wanted to see Bob be successful.
Yeah.
When I first met him, it was like Scott Dickens said, this Bob, he's a really good guy. I had met him before because he worked for Tony Rumble a couple of times. And my impression of Bob was that he's a guy who, didn't look like a star, didn't look like a guy who was going to be on WWF TV every week or whatever, but he was a kid who just, had a lot of desire and whatever. But, he was kind of like, when he started training people, he was kind of like a Pied Piper.
Okay.
Guys who train kids to wrestle, kids look at that person in a very unnatural light.
For sure.
I can equate it to theater, acting teachers.
Yeah.
If you're a young actor, the first guy who's your acting instructor who buys into your dream of being an actor, you hold that person
idealize, right? It's like
idolization. You just really idolize that individual and hold them in an unnaturally high esteem. And that's what Bob had. All these kids that were training with him.
The Bob guys.
The Bob guys.
Right.
And nothing against any of them.
No, of course not. But
I have zero against
a lot
any
of them
those
have
kids.
that tag, that Bob guys tag.
We're Slam Tech. We rule. We're this. We're that. And God bless them, but most of them were not ready to be mainline guys.
Right.
Nothing against them personally, nothing against them as people or whatever. But when Bob got the book, it just the bar dropped.
Okay.
And he was skimming guys.
Yeah.
And his whole thing was he was going to move me out of the way, take over the name, whatever, and he was going to be he acted like I worked for him.
Okay.
He'd do these things where he'd be talking to me on the phone in front of the boys and he'd be yelling at me. Well, what did you do for NECW today? What's the matter with you? You don't take it seriously. I say, hey, man, I work 40 hours a week making the money to put these shows on.
Right.
That's what I did, apart from everything else I did.
Right.
That's what I did.
To even just get to that point.
Right. But the boys don't hear that part of the conversation.
Right.
They're only hearing Bob, telling them that I'm a rotten person or whatever. So anyway, he gets caught with his fist in the till.
Yeah, you guys have a bad falling out.
Yeah, I mean, he just realized, I think, that he wanted to go his own way. He didn't offer to buy the company. He said, well, you give me the name and I'll give you 10% of the profits. And I said, Bob, there's not going to be any profits.
Right.
If there's no profits now, it's not going to be any profits when you're running it. What's the difference? So anyway.
That's when he left and started EPW at that time.
Same guys.
Yeah.
Same angles, same
all of it just kind of all continued over there.
Yeah, just same thing, just different name.
Gotcha.
He tried to steal every single building that I had. He only succeeded with one.
Right.
And
now, you think this was like a familiarity thing that he thought, like these fans will keep coming to shows in these buildings, doesn't matter the name of the promotion? Or
I think Bob kind of bought into his own hoo-ha for a while,
Yeah.
I think what happened with Bob after that split up is that he took a lot of the things that he learned from me, like the online TV and whatever and all these things.
Right.
And the publicity and whatnot and whatever, but he didn't do them the same way. He thought he could take any of these kids and make them a star.
Right.
But what the reality is that the people know the difference between, the mainline guys and the better guys and
A kid from a wrestling school.
Kid from a wrestling school. And again, nothing against any of those kids. Some of them eventually turned out to be decent people, decent hands, but at the time they weren't. And Bob started running his own deal, and I think
not being ready for it is not a bad thing.
Right.
Like everybody starts somewhere, right? But but to be kind of thrown, you're saying into that spot just because of the school, where they were training is
right. Well, and now all of a sudden Bob didn't have anybody who was paying the bills. He had to cut it on his own.
Yeah,
and that wasn't so simple. And he started stiffing buildings and stiffing people, stiffing guys, and
which is all just bad news when it comes to wrestling.
Anyway, when all that happened, George Carroll reached out to me to try to put me together with Matt and Kyle.
Yep.
When my dad died, I got a call from Kyle, reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, if you need anything, so sorry, blah blah blah."
Just something nice for him.
Yeah, right. And so when the split happened, they had George reach out to me, and George tried to broker a deal between us to all come together.
Yeah.
I had 2 other options that I could have pursued at that time. But I met with Matt and Kyle and their partner, Roy, who was the money guy.
Yeah.
Money guy. And after meeting with them, I felt like, okay, they have an infrastructure. They've got all the ring. They've got all the stuff and whatever. And, the things that they were good at, I maybe wasn't so good at.
And and vice versa.
I was good at were complementary to what they might have fallen a little bit short in.
Right.
So we got together, and for a while it was really good. We were doing pretty well in Quincy and whatever. But
now, when you absorbed them, was it like a 50-50 kind of split thing, or
we were all? There was 4
equal
of us who were equal partners. So I went from being the 100% owner of NECW to being a 25% owner of NECW.
Which I'm sure is a drastic change for you.
Yeah, but I was doing what I felt was best for business.
Right.
That the 100% of nothing is
still nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just felt was comfortable after meeting with them. Was comfortable in the situation. We decided to run under the NECW name because I felt very strongly that was a marketable name. We had a lot of publicity.
They were PWF Mayhem? No, it was PWF
New England. Or
was it just New England?
PWF Northeast.
Northeast, okay.
Yeah, I think the Mayhem had disappeared by that time.
By that point, okay.
Yeah. Eventually it was mentioned and brought back again when we unified the titles.
Okay, yeah.
But it was a kind of an interesting time. For a while it was a good partnership, but I think that to be charitable about it, I think that they came into it with a different idea of what the goal was.
Right, than what yours was.
Right. I wanted to be a full-time company on TV and whatever, and they didn't want to do that. Once they realized what was involved in doing that,
right, and making that dream happen,
wanted to get out of it. I think they felt like they weren't going to be the headline guys. The spotlight wasn't going to be on them, and they decided to get out and go their own way. But
was it an amicable split, or
no.
Was right at the end?
Well, originally it was amicable. I mean, we had reached a point. Let me back up because you asked me about the TV
stuff. Yeah.
That was kind of what brought things to the end.
Right.
So we had been doing this online stuff for years.
Yep.
And whatnot, and
you guys had killer downloads too, right? Like you guys, like millions a year.
Well, now this incarnation we got good downloads. Like, tens of thousands sometimes.
Okay, yeah.
But this was again before we were using YouTube,
okay,
or whatever. We didn't use YouTube until I was back on my own.
Okay.
But anyway, so
either way, you guys still do really well with the internet stuff.
Yeah. If you just go through youtube.com/NECW Wrestling and just go through you'll see 7,000, 8,000, 20,000, 30,000, 50,000. It's an enormous number of views. But anyway, to get back to what we were saying, I really felt that, and Paul Richard, who had become our general manager, we kind of said, listen, we're going to make progress here. We need to be on TV, and we can do this. So we made a deal with Comcast Sportsnet.
Yeah.
It was to buy the time, and it was a big deal because Comcast Sportsnet, apart from being on cable throughout New England, is also on the dish. So if you have the sports package, anywhere in the country, you can watch
Comcast Sportsnet.
So we had a potential universe of 48 million homes. Doesn't mean that 48 million people would be watching us,
but they have access to it.
They had access to it, right? So this was a big deal, and we had gone through months of trying to sell advertising, which we were not very good at.
Right.
We weren't doing that great. Kyle claimed to have a company that produced an energy drink that was going to invest $80,000 in the thing. So anyway, we're getting ready to do the TV. We're getting ready to do our first TV taping in December of 2009, and there was talk of a snowstorm that was going to happen late in the night, and Matt went ahead and decided to cancel the show.
Okay. So first TV taping night.
Canceled. No taping. Now we got to go on the air, and we have nothing other than stuff that we've done before.
Right, kind of cut together a best of thing.
Right. So, and then Matt said, well, I'm about to graduate school. I can't help with it because I'm going to be graduating. So it was me and Brian and Paul and Joe Matarazzo and some of the other talent.
Yep.
We all kicked in, and we got the first 4 weeks done. But anyway, so we're ready to go on the first week. I had called in favors. I had maneuvered myself into a position where I got a front page article in the Boston Herald.
Right, which is a big deal.
Huge deal. Who gets the front page?
Yeah.
We had gotten another front page a couple of years before in the Herald. But nobody else.
Right. No.
Short of WrestleMania coming.
Right.
Down,
Yeah.
You would never see
other wrestling on the front page for sure
of the Boston Herald. It's a big deal.
So the president gets the front page,
right. So a couple of days before we're supposed to air, the network calls and says we're not going to air the show.
Now, was it like a quality issue or?
They never exactly said. I didn't find out the real reason until years later. I'll get back to that.
Right.
But anyway, so here we are. We're in a panic, and we said, well, we paid. You got to air us.
Right. And you guys have been promoting it, right? Coming soon.
They came to us and said, well, you open the show, and you're doing the stand-up. You said, hey, welcome to New England Championship Wrestling on Comcast Sportsnet. You can't use our name in the show. I said, yeah, but it's a fact. It's on Comcast Sportsnet.
Right.
He goes, no, well, it makes it sound like we're producing the show, so you can't do that. I said, all right. Now we've got something else that our national office wants that time for something else, and we can't give you any other time. So we were pissed.
Just their way of basically saying we don't want wrestling on the air.
Well, I didn't find out the real reason again until years later.
Sorry.
I'll get to that.
Yeah.
So this is a mystery to us. I mean, people say, well, they didn't like it because it wasn't a very good show, or it wasn't very good. That they never said that to us, ever. Never said that to us. They thought that the shows we produced after those first few weeks were better because they were in the format that we needed to have them
for
that.
Yeah.
But you got to remember that if we're not getting ad revenue from it, we're not going to be able to invest in lighting or invest in any of this.
Right.
There's got to be money
to take those next steps.
Yeah. So anyway, they weren't going to put it on the network, and we were nuts over it. So they finally agreed to put us on Comcast On Demand, and that's a whole different thing.
Right.
So if you haven't,
you're not on Dish anymore, right?
Right. We're just you have to find it,
right?
Which was a tough thing to find.
It was. You had to go to like local.
Yeah,
it was like a whole process. I watched a bunch of episodes.
Right.
We still have some friends that wrestle for NECW, but like when those were happening, super big deal to all of us. Like I can watch my buddy Scott Levesque on demand. Or
the day that we announced it, we did a press conference at their studios with the executives, and we had it online. We had it still exists online on Vimeo somewhere. Yeah, and this was a big deal.
Yeah,
for our 9th anniversary, we had this. We we showed on our screen. Before everybody came in, we gathered everybody around the ring, showed the footage of the press conference, and the workers went nuts.
Nuts, yeah.
People were crying.
Yeah.
That this was like, wow.
This is going to be a big deal.
I mean, this isn't like a local station. This is Comcast Sports.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, it was a big deal. So imagine the egg on our face
when the rug gets pulled out.
When the rug gets pulled out from under us. It was pretty upsetting. And we decided that, okay, we're going to do this on-demand thing for a lot less money. But we do it, and we try to get through it. But what had happened, I think, and again, I can't speak for them. I can only speak from my perception of what happened.
Right.
I think after that took place, they gave up.
Kind of broke them.
Yeah. And then the quality of the guys didn't matter. The quality of the shows didn't matter. We were just slogging through this. Instead of saying, you know what, guys, to hell with it. Let's just make this the best damn show.
Right.
And make people put it back on the air, or make other deals, or get stuff going. We couldn't sell any advertising.
Right.
Because on-demand was basically worthless as an advertising medium.
Yeah. Because it just sits there forever.
Well, it sits there forever, but the other side of it, too, is that, you know, what's an on-demand show worth versus a show that's on broadcast?
Yeah.
If I asked the guy at Channel 38, what is 1 to 2 a.m. on Channel 38 worth? What's a spot during that time? They can give you a number.
Right.
They couldn't give us a number as to what a commercial was worth on this.
Right.
And we ended up not being able to sell anything. So it was a big letdown for us. And we slogged through the year, and at the end of the year, they just said, hey, listen, you know, we want to call a halt to this. We just want to close up. We don't want to lose any more money. We don't want to do this. And that was fine. You know? They didn't say anything about starting up again, whatever. This is all over. Okay, fine. I can't make somebody do something they don't want to do.
Right.
And I don't want to make somebody do something
if they don't want to be there, you don't want them there.
Exactly. You know, there's a lot of things in there. I won't go into them, but anyway, we met with an attorney about a lawsuit against them because Comcast had wronged us.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely had wronged us. They screwed us big time. And
because you guys, I mean, everything. You guys had contracts signed, like this.
It was
ready to go.
The check was written. It was cashed.
Like they had the money.
They had the money in their hand. It wasn't like we didn't pay them or whatever. You know,
you guys didn't breach anything. It was
no.
Right.
You didn't do that. You didn't tell us.
Right.
You know, you didn't tell us we can't put your name in the thing.
Right. Unless it's stated out here in the contract.
Right. So it was, you know, it was a tough thing. But had we put our noses to the grindstone, so to speak, we could have gotten past it very easily. Right. Very easily gotten past it. We could have just elevated the quality of the shows. But, you know, at that point, I think they just wanted to get through it.
Right. Now, you said you guys had gone together, grouped together for the lawsuit.
That was our last act as a group.
As a group, right.
Right. So this lawsuit goes on, took over a year. Eventually it was settled out of court. I can't tell you what it was settled for, but in my opinion it wasn't anywhere near enough.
Not enough.
Nowhere near enough. But I didn't find out the real reason why they didn't air us until a couple of years later. I had restarted, and
because at this time you guys had taken some time off, right? NECW had.
I took 6 months.
6 months, okay. I thought it was. I thought it was a year.
When I split with Matt and Kyle, I didn't have a plan B. I wasn't. I was pretty dedicated to this partnership.
Right.
Of the four of us. I mean, I had done a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I was doing the website and doing the posters and the tickets and the ticketing and the answering all the emails, being talent on the shows, and you know, I also had a radio show on broadcast radio. I got lucky. I lucked into getting a wrestling talk show on a local 50,000 watt AM radio station, which was eventually syndicated on the East Coast. And my pay for that was spots to promote our shows.
Okay. Yeah.
In the 3 years I did that show, I don't think I made $1,000.
Right. But it was
what I got
to
out
promote
of was I basically took a part-time job to promote
the wrestling company.
The wrestling company. And it was my chance to do radio finally, which was great. I had
something you'd always been interested in, right? Yep.
Yeah, but for me, it was a chance for me to raise the visibility of our business and on somebody else's dime, which was a great thing. But anyway, so back to the TV. So we've broken up. I've restarted New England Championship Wrestling, and we had gotten ourselves on television on a local station, WMFP Channel 62.
Right, back doing the TV stuff.
Right, and I'll tell a story about that in a little bit. But I got a message from a guy who owns a local ad agency. He was looking for a favor from me, and I wrote back, "Oh, well, I thought you were contacting me about New England Championship Wrestling," and he says, "No, but we can talk about that for sure." So I met with him and we talked about it.
Right.
The guy who was his second in command at the agency used to be vice president of marketing for WWE. And I was telling him the story of us being on Comcast Sportsnet and they wouldn't air it. And so this guy goes, "Well, I can tell you what happened right now." I says, "Oh?" He goes, "Yeah, that was when Comcast was merging with NBC Universal. And NBC Universal has an exclusive, and none of their Comcast properties can air wrestling
because of WWE."
Yeah, says somebody somewhere red flagged it, and we were never a company that flew under the radar,
right?
Ever.
Yeah.
And so somewhere somebody heard about it.
They went,
easy to find out about.
Yeah.
Because we promoted the holy hell out of it.
Of course.
And somebody somewhere behind the scenes pulled the string. Had I known that was the reason, we could have really run them up the flagpole pretty good. But I didn't know until then. It's a couple of years later.
Yeah.
And but it is what it is. Water under the bridge. You just got to go forward from there. You can't
dwell, right? You can't.
Yeah.
Now, the goal now, obviously, we got some on right now with NECW TV. Mm-hmm. Are you guys trying to go back out onto actual broadcast television again? Or?
I'd like to. It's a matter of dollars.
Right.
It's a matter of capital. To do what I want to do would be more like what Dave Marquez does with Championship Wrestling from Hollywood.
Okay.
And for that, you need an environment that's really TV friendly. We were trying to make a deal with Nesson when we had gone back on TV in 2013.
Yep.
It was a situation where we were getting so many views on YouTube. We were killing it on YouTube. We racked up millions of views.
Where you're like, it's got to be able to translate over. Right?
Yeah. So I just reached out to them and said, "Hey, listen, we've got this show, blah, 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 and, we're killing it on your, would like to talk to you about maybe doing something with you." And we were on their radar before.
Right.
NECW was as far back as like the very beginning of the company.
Yeah.
Now, originally I was told, well, after you're in business for a few years, give us a call or whatever. We'll revisit this. I never did. We were just trying to get my legs under me and so on. And we were in no position to do any sort of television for a while. But anyway, so I get down to do this letter and so forth, and I got a call back and said, "Yeah, I would like to sit and talk with you. Please come down." I took Paul Richard with me, and we sat there, and the guy that we met with was the program director, and kind of told us how the whole Nesson thing works, and told us we had been on their radar, and their big thing was they wanted the show to be more like an arena show.
Okay.
They didn't want to see folding chairs. They don't want to air a show that looks like a cheap independent.
Looks like
show,
indie wrestling. Yeah.
Right. Which I fully understood, and I said to them, "Well, look, I'm on this TV station, and we're not paying very much money to be on, and we're selling commercials for $25 and $50,
whatever it is,
whatever. Yeah, that's the universe I'm in right now. If I'm on Nesson, then I'm in a different universe. We can charge more money, and maybe we can do more things." So it got batted around and so forth, and I think they wanted us to see us come up with more of an investment, and that just wasn't possible at the time.
What was going down.
But it's certainly something that could be revisited with them. The door's not closed there by any stretch of the imagination. And I mean, the idea of having New England Championship Wrestling on New England Sports Network was very appealing.
I was going to say it kind of goes hand in hand there. It makes sense.
They wouldn't be airing XYZ Wrestling, although Ring of Honor they aired, but that's a time buy. Ring of Honor bought the time
through them, yeah.
Right.
Now, when you guys split and Kyle and Matt started running PWF again, and then you started running NECW again, did you notice like differences in the promoting, or was obviously there was not good? You guys had wrestling heat. Against each other. Was there ever any? Did you feel like there was direct shots at you? Or
they were doing a radio show at one point, and
like a wrestling roundtable or something. Right?
Yeah. And I've got an attorney that was like monitoring their Facebook and monitoring the thing, and they were saying stuff about me, and this lawyer says to me, "Man, you got to sue these guys. You got to go after them, man. And we got the rights. You got them a dozen ways from Sunday. You could just ruin their life. I deserve to be." And I'm like, I don't want to do that.
Right, that's not something that you're interested in.
It's not a positive, I don't want to spend energy going backwards. I want to spend my energy going forward.
Pushing forward.
Right. So I just did my thing and ignored it.
Yeah.
Just ignored whatever. I can't worry about what they're doing. I have no control over it.
Yeah. Now, NECW has been up and running regularly again for a few years now.
Yeah. It takes some time here and there.
Of course. Now, you guys have some shows coming up, I think.
April 14th, we're at the Galvin Middle School in Wakefield.
Yep.
And then May 6th, we're doing the 2017 Iron 8.
Right. Now, the Iron 8 thing has become one of the most popular traditions in this New England area. How did the idea for the Iron 8 come up? Because you've had a lot of names in there: Warbeard Hansen, Nunzio. You guys have used a lot of different talent. Where did the idea for the Iron 8 come from?
Well, it actually came from Kevin Kelly. Kevin Kelly was the booker of NECW for a brief period of time.
WWF's Kevin Kelly, right?
That's right.
Okay,
that's right.
I feel like there was another Kevin Kelly for some reason.
He used to be a theater critic for the Boston Globe. Was Kevin Kelly?
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
But anyway, so we had our 3rd year anniversary show, and the main event was a 4-way 45-minute Iron Man match.
Right.
Between Bob Evans, Antonio Thomas, Maverick Wild, who was the champion, and Alex Arion. And the match was such a success as a match and as a main event that it just kind of triggered the idea that, man, this is something that
right.
So I just kind of took it from there and thought maybe if this was the culmination of something, that it would work. And I was looking for a signature event for us.
Yeah.
Something that would be uniquely ours. So I decided to do the Iron 8, make it an 8-man tournament, and with the final, with it only being 2 rounds.
Right.
The 4 single elimination matches, and then the 4-way 45-minute Iron Man match.
Yeah.
Right. And the first year that we did it, we tried to do it over 2 nights.
I was going to say, I feel like the first couple of years, was it two nights, or was it just the first year?
Yeah, it was just the first year was 2 nights. Bad idea.
Right, yeah.
Bad idea.
Was this because, people didn't cross over from one night to the next, or were people going there on the last night to watch the finals? Why should I go to the first one when I can just go right to the final? Yeah.
Why should I see the prelims when I can go right to the main event? But there were some pretty heavy-duty people, and Mike Bennett was in that first one, and we had a kid named Paul Terrell from England. Doug Williams was in that first one. Arion. It was
some real heavy hitters.
Yeah, absolutely. Great experience.
Now, Iron 8, you said coming up. Who's involved this year?
Well, we've announced 6 of the names.
6 out of the 8.
6 out of the 8. Brad Hollister.
Yep. Big Bacon.
Big Bacon. Yep. We've announced Heat Chris Pyro. We've announced Kai Katana.
Okay.
We've announced a kid from Finland making his American debut. His name is Mikko Palantera.
I've not heard the name before, but
he's from Finland.
I'm gonna have to check that out.
It's kind of a tradition in NECW of international people
bringing them in,
running a break. who else have we announced? We have announced. Jeez. Because I don't want to say who we haven't.
Yeah. You don't want that stuff to slip out.
Maxwell Jacob Feinstein.
Okay. Yep.
And there's one more. Who am I missing? Missing somebody. I'll think of it.
Yeah.
Go on our website. Go on
you
our
figure it out.
You'll see it. Yeah. The last 2 names will be announced next Tuesday.
So next Tuesday, the last 2 names.
Yeah.
People are going to be excited.
Yeah, I think people are going to be really excited. Yeah.
And what else do we have in store for the for those shows? Because I know you have one previous to the Iron 8, right?
Right. It's a benefit show for Wakefield Academy, which is the after-school program at the Galvin Middle School in Wakefield. And Tony Atlas is on that card. Main event is a 6-man tag. Brute Van Slyke and his Brute Squad.
The Brute Squad, yep.
Yeah, the Suplex Files is the kids who work as a tag team as the Suplex Files. Together with Brute, they're called
the Brute Squad, right? Yeah.
Against Tony Atlas, Slick Wagner Brown, and Steve Cummings, who's the Wakefield High School football coach.
Okay. Now, does he wrestle on the regular, or
no?
Just like one of those kind of
things. Yeah.
Pretty cool though. It must be. Yeah. I'm sure there'll be tons of kids that he's the coach of, flipping out, and
that's it. We've got Toto Loco is injured. He's had knee surgery back in November.
Okay.
He's not going to be ready to go again until the summer. So what we're doing, rather than have a tournament for the title, what's going to happen is Pure Talent Chris Escobar is going to trade the TV title for the heavyweight title.
Okay.
So he'll be the NECW heavyweight champion. We will do something to decide who the new television champion is at a later date. He will face the Heat Chris Pyro. We have Mistress Belmont versus Davienne for the Triple W title in an I Quit match. We've got a women's tag, Tequila Rose and Luscious Latasha against Adira and Asana.
Asana, yep.
Yeah.
Seen that posted recently.
Iron 8 preview match, Brad Hollister against Cooley K. That's the one I forgot.
Cooley K.
Right, Cooley K, who is back from Japan. He was formerly, when he was part of the House Party, one half of the NECW Tag Team Champions. So it's going to be good. We've got Adrenaline Rush versus Cool People in a #1 contenders match for the NECW Tag Team Championship. And a couple of matches to be named later. So.
Yeah, and 6 extra bonus bouts. So
right,
2 extra bonus bouts on the bottom of the post.
Right.
Now, do you have any advice to guys trying to break into wrestling? Maybe not even just wrestlers, but referees, even people trying to promote.
You know, I don't know that I have very many years left being a promoter.
Right.
You know, I just celebrated my 60th birthday this past summer.
Happy birthday!
Thank you. I was back in August, but
it's cool still.
I've got more years behind me than I have in front of me.
Right.
So I'm already starting to think about the end game. You know, for me personally, I love wrestling. I continue to love wrestling. I have, you know, throughout all the ups and downs, I've, you know, gotten so much out of it, so much more out of it than I ever thought that I would.
Right.
That I think that, you know, the state of the business right now, even in the last couple of years, has really changed significantly. A lot of things that are not taught in wrestling are things about how to do business. Like, I think the one thing that I would give as advice to anybody, whether it's in wrestling or anything, is that integrity is important. Your word is your bond. If you give your word to a promoter that you're going to be there, you're going to be a part of something, that promoter is making an investment in giving you match time, you don't undermine that. You don't like blow that off or whatever. Right. If you don't like the way something's going, you should speak up, and you should, you know, don't try to slog your way through something you hate. Just be upfront and honest. I think honesty is always the best policy. I think that don't look at wrestling as one trainer's view of what you think wrestling is, because a trainer will train you a certain way, and I think the state of training is very poor right now for the most part. I mean, I think today's wrestlers are better athletes.
Right, but the actual
like, the further we get away from the old way of doing things, the more that people just make it up as they go along, and they think that that's the way it's supposed to be. Never disrespect your own push.
Right.
If the company's pushing you, never work against yourself. This is a big thing. I don't think that a lot of talent locally realizes how close some of these companies are to each other.
Running together, yeah.
So, like, if you want to be booked for every single company, don't work against another company that you're working for.
Right.
Like, for example, if you're getting a push in my company and you're going to work the next night in a place up the street, don't work the same guy.
Okay,
don't let that other promoter. If you got an angle going in my company, don't let some other promoter
then blow it off somewhere else.
Yeah, like, that's not cool.
Right.
In the last several years, I've seen a number of incidents where, like, our angles, our programs, even like promos I've written word for word,
were used,
stolen and used in another company. That's theft.
Right.
I don't. That ain't cool.
And stuff like that doesn't. It's tough to regulate in pro wrestling, right? Like, ideas like that, where if you're a writer and somebody steals your writing, it's copyright infringement, all that
just low.
problems.
Like,
right.
You don't have any ideas of your own.
Right.
But you got to remember
lack of creativity.
That, like, people who are coming up now as promoters, I mean, they didn't live through the 70s or the old schools. They didn't live through even the 80s. They didn't live through. They don't know any of that. They don't. That's not part of their experience. They just can come in and, history's important. Knowing the business that you're in. If you don't know where it was, you can't figure out where to take it. You can't. It's important to know that.
Right.
There's like a lost generation. The 80s and 90s were kind of a lost generation. A lot of the veterans were trying to keep their spot and didn't teach guys. None of that stuff trickled down.
Right.
Territories disappeared. There was no place for people. We're the place now. We're the territories now are us.
The indies, yeah.
Are the indies. And I think that there's a lot of guys out there that really don't have a handle on what
a grasp of what it takes to run a successful promotion.
Yeah.
Because anybody can buy a ring. You can rent out a VFW hall.
Before. They learned a lot of very expensive lessons to get to where they are now. But, nonetheless.
Right, they made it to where they are. And, they may have had to, like you said, learn expensive lessons, but they were learned.
I was hanging around independent wrestling for 10 years before I promoted a show.
Right.
10 years. And I still didn't know everything.
Right.
I don't know everything now, but it's a long time to be around. You got to respect what you're doing. Like, if you just walk in with a big checkbook and think that, I'm in the wrestling business, you should get out now.
Right.
Because you're going to have a small checkbook when
soon.
You're done.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a certain amount of respect. Like, I always, when I started promoting, I would defer to the guys a lot.
Right.
And I would say, you know what's best. You know what makes you look good. You tell me, and we'll figure it out from there. And I think a lot of people had respected me for that because I wasn't trying to dictate. I don't like.
Right, you weren't telling them that you were smarter than them, or that you knew more.
And sometimes the best ideas come as evolutions from the ideas that you started with.
Right.
I'm not afraid to say, well, what do you think about this? Do you think we should change it? Do you think, what do you... sometimes you get a better match these days. In our company right now, some of the more veteran people like Slick Wagner Brown, that's somebody that you can trust with. Hey Wagner, what do you think about?
Right. Yeah.
When we had guys like Antonio Thomas and people like that, in the company, I would certainly solicit their opinion and ask them what they thought and. Wanted them to be happy with what we were doing.
Yeah.
And so forth, But, like I said, it was a good 5 or 6 years before I kind of got my legs under me. And
really,
Yeah.
Had got the groove down.
I didn't book the company until, 2012.
Really?
Yeah. I usually had somebody else book.
Right, just somebody was You were just in charge of the overall.
I just didn't think I was qualified.
Right.
You know, I just thought, well, other people, and some people did well, some people didn't do well.
Right.
You know, some people, you know, had a concept, you know, and some people had no idea.
Right. Just kind of blindly going into it.
Yeah. Couldn't book his way out of a paper bag if you spotted him in the open end.
Gotcha.
You know?
Sheldon. It's been a pleasure, man. I really appreciate you coming down and doing this with us. It's been 2 hours, which is crazy. That flew by.
Has it been 2 hours?
Yeah, it has. Yeah, I know. I didn't even realize. I just looked down at the clock.
Warmed up. No,
Yeah. It's been turned into a Steve the Turtle Weiner-esque podcast. He did about he did about 4 hours worth, and in a very linear fashion, where he would correct us where we were and bring us back in time.
I just want to say thanks so much for taking the drive down. Thank you for listening and actually wanting to come on and tell your story, and it's much appreciated.
Thank you guys for letting me do that. I want to say that you know, I've been a fan of some of your podcasts. I really enjoyed the Ryan Drew podcast.
Right? Yeah. There's one of our more recent ones, and we had Mav on too. We had Maverick Wild on as well a couple episodes ago.
Haven't heard that one yet.
Yeah,
Maverick's one of my favorite people. He was the guy that
good dude
that probably was booked the worst.
Yeah.
Of all the NECW champions.
Yeah, the worst.
Yeah, I mean, it just didn't. You know, Bob just didn't really.
Yeah. I don't know if he had too many Bob positive things to say.
Yeah, well, you know, what can I tell you?
But you had said something to me to us in a message earlier about how you were glad to come down to do it because we were given a voice to the voiceless of New England, and we never really thought of it that way.
You know, that's important. There's a lot of stuff that people don't know about wrestling in New England,
right,
that they should know. And
I love learning about it too,
right,
about from all these different people. I mean, we had Sergeant Muldoon on, who ran like the beaches, you know what I mean, up north and all that stuff. And I didn't know about any of that being from here.
Right. Yeah, and there were for years, you know, people like shit on New England. And
right.
People outside of the area for years, you know, the tri-state area, that was the place to be.
Right.
That was the place where all the guys came from. But if you look at wrestling now, you know, look at up and down the WWE roster, TNA, or Ring of Honor.
Here,
how many New England guys?
The percentages are
yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible, and that's because we have a history of good pro wrestling.
Right.
Now, that back in the Kowalski days, nothing against Walter, who was a great guy, a great man.
Yeah.
But just doing spot shows, that doesn't make you
a great wrestling promoter.
You know. Yeah, it's another thing for a young talent. Don't think of it as just I want to have a great match. It's one thing to have a great match. There's another thing to have a great series of matches that put people in seats. It's a very important concept. And that talent need to understand that part of their job as a wrestler is not just to show up and have a good match or do a promo if you're asked or whatever, but part of your job is to be somebody that people want to pay money to see.
Right, whether it's to cheer or to boo,
right,
to get them there.
Exactly. If you want to, if you're gonna like work for everybody, and if you're young and you're getting started, maybe you do want to work as much as you can work for everybody. But after a certain point, you should be a little more judicious about who you work for and what you do.
Right.
Don't do the same program in two different places. Unless it's with the blessing of the person that created that program. Don't, work one night for one guy and the next night up the street, because or don't double shot in the same area. That's a big one, because now you really are working against yourself.
Right.
If that promoter is booking you to draw people, and you're working somewhere else the same night, you're
like you're splitting the audience.
Yeah, exactly. It's just little things like that. But again, I want to thank you guys for having me on here, and keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
If we didn't cover anything, or you want to do this again sometime,
I'd love to.
More than happy. Very much enjoyed it. Very much enjoyed the drive down. And thanks again for having me on. My pleasure.
Sheldon, thank you so much, man.
Thanks again. Much appreciated, and I hope the fans will look forward to listening to this one. And fans that are listening right now, Thank you for listening, and I always have to end it. It's a stick. It's my stick, Trainee. I gotta end it awkward. So, good day and good night.
All right, everybody, check out the Facebook, Twitter, all that fun stuff.
Keep them new T-shirts.
Yeah, we got some new shirts. Pick them up on Pro Wrestling Tees. Everybody else, have a good night
and goodbye.